Here's a question that every IELTS candidate gets asked, and almost every candidate answers the same boring way. Do you find it easy to learn languages? Band 5 answer, no, it is quite difficult. English is not easy for me. Band 8 answer, honestly, I find it a real challenge, but it's one I'm genuinely enjoying. There's something satisfying about the moment a new phrase just clicks, you know? Same question, completely different impression. And today, we're going to break down exactly how to talk about language learning, which, by the way, is the topic you are literally doing right now.
That's what makes this part one topic so interesting, isn't it? You're not being asked about something abstract. You're being asked about your experience learning English, which means you already have real material to work with. I'm Felicity, and this is the IELTS Speaking Podcast.
And I'm Anthony. And before we dive in, a quick reminder about what makes this podcast different. Everything we share here comes from over a decade of real examiner experience. We've sat across from thousands of candidates in actual examination rooms. So when we tell you what works, it's not theory. We've seen it play out again and again.
And this episode is honestly one of my favorites from the Part 1 series because the language learning topic gives candidates such a unique opportunity. You can speak from genuine experience. You don't need to fabricate anything. Your IELTS journey is the content.
Exactly. So let's get into it. First, what questions actually come up in this frame?
Right, so examiners typically ask things like, do you find it easy to learn a new language? Or what's the most difficult thing about learning a language? They might also ask, would you like to learn another language in the future? And sometimes, how did you learn English?
Great. So we've got difficulty, challenges, future intentions, and the how you learned angle. Lots of different directions. Let's start with the most common one, difficulty.
Okay, Anthony, let's hear it. The examiner asks you, do you find it easy to learn a new language?
I'd say it's genuinely challenging, but also really rewarding. I think what I find most difficult is getting the pronunciation right. There are sounds in English that just don't exist in my first language, so it takes a lot of deliberate practice to get those right. But at the same time, I love the feeling when something finally sticks.
Okay, so let's unpack that because there's so much going on. Notice what Anthony did. He didn't just say, yes, it's hard, or no, it's easy. He gave a nuanced answer with two layers. First, what's difficult, and he named something specific, pronunciation. Then, second, he added a counterpoint, the reward side. That contrast is what separates Band 6 from Band 7+.
And the phrase deliberate practice, that's a great collocation. Way better than just saying I practice a lot.
Exactly. Let's talk about phrases. I want to give listeners 5 phrases for this topic that they can genuinely steal. And I mean steal. Take these, make them yours, use them in the real test.
Love that one. What's phrase 2?
Phrase 2. What helps me most is. So instead of just describing a problem, you move into solutions. What helps me most is listening to podcasts in English, which is, very relatable for our listeners.
Very meta. Okay, 3?
I'd love to get to grips with. This is a great phrase for talking about future languages. I'd love to get to grips with Spanish one day. It sounds idiomatic, natural, and it shows range.
Ooh, get to grips with. That's a lovely idiom. Examiners will notice that. What about 4?
Felicity. I consider myself somewhat of a. So you can say, I consider myself somewhat of a language enthusiast. Or, I consider myself somewhat of a slow learner when it comes to grammar. That somewhat other construction is really sophisticated without being overcomplicated.
And 5?
Last one. What I've noticed is, this is your go-to for showing self-awareness. What I've noticed is that I make more progress when I use the language every day rather than studying in big chunks at the weekend. That's a full, developed answer, just from one simple opener.
Okay, repeat after me moment. Here we go. Say this out loud. What I've noticed is. Go on, say it. What I've noticed is. Excellent. Now finish it with something true from your experience. And that is a Band 7+ opener right there.
Now, let's do some band school progression. I love this part. Same question. What's the most difficult thing about learning a language? Let's hear it at 4 levels.
Band 5-6 first. Grammar is very difficult. It is hard to remember all the rules. Also, vocabulary is difficult.
Okay, that's functional, but repetitive vocabulary, difficult twice, simple structures only, no development. That's band 5 territory. Band 6 7?
For me, the most challenging aspect is probably grammar, specifically knowing which tense to use when I'm speaking quickly. I don't always have time to think, so I sometimes make mistakes under pressure.
Better, more specific, knowing which tense to use when speaking quickly, that's a real observation. Complex structure too, with the conditional feel. Now, band 7 8.
Honestly, I think the hardest part is achieving natural fluency. Not just being grammatically correct, but sounding like someone who actually uses the language day to day. You can memorize all the vocabulary and grammar rules, but there's this gap between knowing the rules and using them automatically. That's the bit I find most fascinating and frustrating in equal measure.
Ooh, fascinating and frustrating in equal measure. That is a band 8 phrase right there. You're showing emotional complexity and vocabulary range in one sentence. And Anthony used achieving natural fluency, a really precise collocation. Let's hear band 8 plus.
Honestly, what I find most challenging, and this is something I think about quite a lot, is the cultural dimension of language. It's not just about words and grammar, is it? Every language carries with it a whole set of assumptions, idioms, humor, things that native speakers absorb almost unconsciously from childhood. Trying to tune into that as an adult learner is, I think, the deepest challenge. You can be technically accurate, but still somehow sound foreign.
Gorgeous. The cultural dimension of language, referencing idiom, humor, unconscious acquisition, that's sophisticated abstract thinking. That's what band 8 and above sounds like.
And the key thing is, you do not need to actually believe this as your genuine philosophical view on language. You just need to be able to express it fluently. That is the IELTS fabrication principle at work. Language quality is what's being assessed, not the depth of your philosophical insight.
Right. You're not writing a PhD thesis. You're demonstrating communicative ability. Big difference.
Okay, so let's talk about the future intentions questions. Would you like to learn another language in the future? This is where a lot of candidates just say, yes, I want to learn French. Full stop.
And that is a band 5 answer. So, what does a band 7 version look like?
Actually, yes. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I'd love to learn Spanish at some point. Partly because it's so widely spoken, but also because so much incredible literature was written in Spanish. I figure if I could read Marquez in the original, that would be pretty extraordinary.
Did you catch the layering there? He gave a reason, widely spoken, then a personal reason, literature, then he extended it to a specific goal, reading Marquez in the original. That's exactly the kind of development that moves you from band 6 to band 7 and beyond.
And here's the meta trick, the thing that makes this topic uniquely powerful for IELTS candidates. You can directly reference your IELTS preparation as part of your answer. The examiner knows you're an IELTS candidate. Using that as content isn't strange, it's actually really authentic.
So, for example, if they ask, how have you been improving your English recently? You could say, I've actually been preparing intensively for this test, and I've noticed that doing practice speaking exercises has helped me enormously with spontaneous expression. It's one thing to write in English, quite another to produce it in real time under pressure.
That's a great example. It's honest, it's developed, it uses sophisticated vocabulary like spontaneous expression and produce in real time, and it uses the meta angle, referencing the IELTS journey itself as content.
All right, let's do the quick wins recap before we close. 3 things to remember from today.
Number one, Be specific about what's difficult, not grammar is hard. Instead, I find knowing which tense to use under time pressure particularly challenging. Specificity equals higher band.
Number two, use the meta angle. Your English learning journey is the content. Reference it. Preparing for this test has taught me is a perfectly valid, sophisticated answer.
And number three, layer your answers. Don't give just one point. Contrast it on one hand, but on the other, or it's challenging, but there's also something incredibly satisfying about. Layering shows communicative range. That's what examiners are listening for.
And remember, the phrases we gave you today, I've always found particularly challenging. What I've noticed is, I'd love to get to grips with. These are real IELTS grade phrases. Practice them, make them automatic. And when this topic comes up in your test, and it very likely will, you'll be ready.
If today helped you, please subscribe. We drop new episodes every week with more of this insider stuff. And honestly, share this one with a friend who's preparing for IELTS. It could make a real difference to their score.
Next time, we're tackling part two, and it's a topic that trips up so many candidates because they think it's simple, but there are some real hidden traps. Trust me, you'll want to hear that one. Stay tuned.
Until then, keep speaking, keep practicing, and we'll see you in the next episode.